are now entering our very first scholarly paper session. This session contains a series of outstanding presentations by researchers and academicians from all around the world. Each talk will consist of 20 minutes presentations, 10 minutes discussion, and 10 minutes Q&A. In a few seconds, the host of the conference will activate breakout room. You may see breakout room icon on the bottom side of your Zoom interface. As you click on this icon, please choose a room as you desired. In room 1, there will be Professor Umesh Sharma to discuss social capital and budgeting in a local church, and Professor Hien Thi Tu Phang discussing service quality as a black swan countering mechanism for Vietnam banks. In room 2, there will be Professor Masumi Nakashima discussing fraud detection by text analysis of CEO letters perspective as well as the determinants of perceived earning quality. Please always acknowledge that this main room will always be opened to display time schedule and several promotional videos. You may now start joining breakout room. May you have a very pleasant discussion.
Okay, so welcome to parallel session day 2 dash 1. So this is room number 1, dated November 10, this Wednesday. Yeah, so I'm moderating this session. I am Norma Omar from University Technology Mara, Malaysia. Yeah, so there are 2 papers at this session. The first paper is paper ID 30, Social Capital and Budgeting in a Local Church. This is by Umesh Sharma. I can see he is here. Yeah, and we will have a discussion, Dr. Ellie Susanna from University Technology Mara. Yeah, and then the second paper supposedly is paper ID number 80, Service Quality as a Black Swan Countering Mechanism for Vietnamese Commercial Bank, a Network Data Analysis by Dr. Hien Thi Tu Phang, yeah, from Foreign Trade University, Vietnam. Yeah, unfortunately, I have not been able to see her name in this room today and earlier on. Okay, I will be discussing her paper, but in the event that she's not able to come, I may be able to give you some extra time, Umesh,
No
and also Dr. Ellie, and also Q&A. Yeah, so I think we have a good many minutes extra as a result of that. Okay, time allocated for each paper is 20 minutes for your presentation. 10 minutes for discussion, which I think yesterday, through my own experience, I think 10 minutes is too short for the discussion. So we may extend it, and then also 10 minutes for Q&A. Yeah. So a reminder will be notified to both the presenters and the discussion a few minutes before your time is due. Yeah. And request for participants, as much as possible, I think I want to encourage that you post your question using the chat function in Zoom. Uh, uh, to allow other participants to also ask questions. Preferably, I encourage participants can only ask once so as to give chances. But in the event that Dr. Fan is not able to join us, I think I'm still giving her time because I have sent message through her mobile also. Yeah, so in the event that she's not able to come, so we will have more time, and I think we can have a ball with Ume Sharma today. Yeah. Okay, so with that, let's now begin. I shall stop sharing shortly. Yeah, but I think this is actually a very interesting event, having the parallel session. One of the special trait of APAMA is arranging a discussion for each paper. So this is very good for researcher because I think you will get a lot of good feedback from the discussion, and we also allow a lot of Q&A from other people. And in the event that a participant has got what we call it suggestion, you can also include that in the chat box. Not necessarily it must be question. Yeah? So in case you have a good suggestion, I think you can do that. I think with that, I want to invite Umesh Sharma from Waikato University to present his paper titled Social Capital and Budgeting in a Local Church. The time is yours, Umesh. Okay, I will stop sharing so that you can share yours. Are you able to share?
Can you see my screen?
Yes, very clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Onoma, for your kind introduction. The title of my paper is Social Capital and Budgeting in a Local Church. And this has been co-authored with one of my PhD students, Denise Frost. She is actually a member of this particular church, and so she had all this access to all this lovely data, and she went out and collected the data from the field. So what we see in this paper is we are trying to apply social capital theory to this paper. And when we talk about social capital, we're talking about community, how people come together and trying to develop budgeting. And this is more like participatory budgeting. And this is something we find that we don't see a lot of cases where we go and talk to the individuals involved in the budget setting process. Most of the literature in budgeting seems to be focused around contingency theory. It's basically around linear regression model. But what we are trying to see here is the construction of budget from a social constructivist perspective. So we're looking at the budgeting process in a local church from a social capital perspective. The social capital perspective is kind of a community where the group of people come together and then they go about doing their day-to-day work. So we're looking from a social capital perspective rather than the secular device which has been used in previous studies, particularly in church. We see the sacred. Sacred is where our belief systems, more spiritual values and all that, that's what the religious organizations are guided towards. And the secular divide, this is where accounting plays an important role. And the secular is what you call profane. It's kind of looking at financial planning, budgeting and all that. And end of the day, that all these things that we are doing, financial planning, the ultimate goal is to support the sacred activity, the spiritual activity that's going on within that religious denomination. So when we look at studies in the budgeting literature, particularly in church, there has been a lot of work done in church literature. I think Lee Parker does a lot of work on that. You have Kerry Jacobs, Helen Ivan did some work. And basically when we look at those literature, we just look at uh, the literature with a sacred secular divide, but we don't seem to be integrating the two. So what we are trying to do in this paper is trying to use social capital, whereby we integrate those two elements, and we don't see a lot about the social capital in the budgeting process. We built on Boland and Pondi's study from Accounting Organization and Society, where they said accounting is a union of rational and natural perspective. So we basically see a lot of things from a technical side, but we don't see a lot from the natural perspective. And this is where we are coming from in this paper. So it's kind of an interpretive study, and we're trying to look at how people interpret things and why they are doing what they are doing, that sort of thing. And we're trying to make that perspective better known and more accessible to those where the training has mostly been significantly among the positivist dimension. So this is more or less an interpretive study. And what do you see that the academic research seems to become more distant from what's happening within an organization. So we're trying to look at an insight story. Our storyline is what's happening within a church. So looking at the participants and why they are doing what they are doing. So moving on to the church literature, the budgeting. We have lots of studies carried out on budgeting. And as I said, the sacred and secular divide, that is something that's been dominating the academic literature on church. We see them as separate, and what we are trying to do is to pull them together and making them more integrated. And based on the notion that the activities in church are either sacred, which is spiritual, or secular, and that's profane. It's coming from financial planning, budgets, and all that. Is trying to support the sacred activities. So accounting is seen to be a secular or profane activity coming from Booth 1993, and obviously is regarded as not so relevant to the life of the organization. And we only tolerate it as far as it's able to support the sacred activity taking place within the religious organization. So we haven't seen a lot on studies which are trying to integrate the sacred and the profane, the accounting activities, particularly in a church, and we make an attempt to do that using a social capital in the budgeting process. So earlier we have just seen we talked about sustainability, and when we look at integrated reporting, which just came up more recently, it's built on the notion of 6 capitals, and one of these capital is the social capital, and the social capital is focusing on the natural processes, is all around people, and has been studied from a wide variety of perspectives. The social capital, basically, we've seen a lot happening in the management literature, but we were kind of struggling to find literature in accounting around this area. A few researchers, we had Smith, David Smith in Australia, and I think the other person is Nava Subramaniam from RMIT, who works in that area. So we basically, when we tried to look at the management control systems literature, we just found very few literature on social capital, and even those that were there weren't specifically addressing the issue of church. So we came up with the two research questions, and these are: does social capital influence the budgeting process in church? And does the budgeting process influence social capital in a church? So coming up with the theoretical framework, we have using social capital, and the social capital obviously builds on work of Bourdieu, Coleman, and Putnam. And we actually have three different dimensions within social capital, and these dimensions are structural dimension, which basically looks at the network ties, the sort of network we have, appropriable organization, having tea room and all that, where people come together, have lunches together. And then we have the next dimension called a relational dimension, which is based on trust. Trust is very important, where people trust each other, the sort of norms we have, our expectation, and obviously our identity. That's important. And the last dimension that social capital talks about is the cognitive dimension, and that is based on the shared language, the vocabulary, shared narratives, how things are done together, more or less sort of institutionalized or routinized way of looking at things. So there's a cognitive dimension, and the shared dimension, the cognitive dimension, allows for comprehensive analysis of social capital, and because it looks at the shared context. And Neifert and Goschel, that's where we are drawing the social capital from. Like what Lachlan said in his 1995 paper, it's more like a skeletal theory. And so what we need flesh, like we need empirical flesh, we need field studies to make it more meaningful and complete. So we're trying to do that. And obviously, I talked about those dimensions, and comprising of social capital. And looking at them, the first dimension, the structural dimension, is about the connections, the network that exists between organizational participants or actors. And then you have a relational dimension, and relational dimensions are basically formed around having trust, identification, trying to leverage your relationship within the organization. And the cognitive dimension, the last dimension of social capital, is basically looking at shared context, the shared language. We all speak the same language, and so forth. And the shared values are all examples of cognitive dimension. The provision of staff rooms, communal areas where staff can meet, are also important, and because they all build community, making stronger communities. So we are trying to develop that framework of Neifert and Goschel. So we just with our data, we just try to look at that Neifert and Goschel and look at the church literature, the church here, and then we found that there were a few things that we could play around with. And basically, we didn't have a physical space for people to connect, which came out to structural dimension. So that's something we are adding. And we were also adding cognitive dimension. I thought we could really name that as shared context, because context is all talking about shared language, shared views, and so on. So the research method, it's a qualitative multiple, it's not a multiple, it's a qualitative single site study. And we used interpretive methodology, and data were collected primarily through interviews, supplemented by documentary evidence we got from the organization, and the managers involved in the budgeting process were identified. 15 interviews with 14 interviewees, and one of the authors had personal connections. He has been with the church for more than 20 years, and going to church every Sunday, basically, and that gives us some issue of reflexivity. And the other researchers were considered to be outsiders, so we helped in interpreting the data. The case study is Fountain Springs, and that is an independent Pentecostal church which was founded in the 1970s and situated in the city where we live, in Hamilton, New Zealand. And each week around 1,000 people attend the morning service, and we with about around 400 attending a Sunday evening service. And it had some ups and downs, and particularly from 1994 to 2004, it had a period of upheaval due to a leadership which wasn't very kind of ethical leadership. I think there was some sort of misuse of funding, and all those things were going on, and the public support or the confidence was lost, and the new leaders had to bring that back. So there was a moral failure of a previous leader in the 1980s, which had some kind of created some issues for the membership. And so the cash flow was running low around 1990s, and after the confidence came back from the public, the finances started improving after 1995. And around 2001, with more ethical leadership, we found that there were acceptance of value-based leadership, and donations started flowing in. The values are connected to the spiritual journey of the senior leaders. So that's the values. It's all about the religious organization. It's all about a spiritual journey. And the governance structure was changed in 2011. The church brought in people with expertise. They brought in independent directors. They brought in chartered accountants and other professionals from outside to be sitting on their boards. And they have a leadership team of 9, and they meet every week. And it is set up as a trust and registered as a charity within the New Zealand Charities Commission. And it has an income of around 1.26 million annually. And this is mainly coming from the members' donations. So the budgeting process at Fountain Springs, we anonymize the name of the church. So how does that happen? It happens around mid-February, when the finance administrator informs the area leaders that the area budget is due in mid-March, and then the area leaders have been given the opportunity to collate their area budgets and prepare a draft budget, which they all come up with. They're prioritizing what they expect to do. And then the next step is a leadership team meeting. Capital expenditure decisions are prioritized. And then the budget is obviously approved by the leadership team. And the finance administrator provides area leaders with individualized monitoring report as well, and just trying to see how your actual spending compares against the budget. So the budget process is completely very different here, because people seem to be very much caring about each other. For them, spirituality is very important, and according to the interviews, they're not competing for money as such. They're very generous with each other, and according to them, money seem to be not playing an important role. It's all based on the needs of the people. And the 4 values important to the norms, that's the relational dimension, is all about valuing people, integrity, authenticity, and vulnerability. And this is very important value for us, because it's like having glasses on and we view everything through that. So those are the common values we have. Um, the people called care leader said that although we are not literally going through each value with every question that we asked about budgets, it is at the forefront. So this is when we do budget, we care about integrity, authenticity, and vulnerability. We think about integrity. We are thinking about transparency, and all of that stuff. When you are looking at budgets in everything we do, that underpinning our budgets, and decisions were based on what is best for the church, not competing for finance as such. So under relational dimensions still under the social capital theoretical framework. Uh, uh, for the interviews saying valuing people involves spending money on looking after those on their team or other volunteers in the area. So they always made sure that the volunteers were given some sort of good treatment, like invitation for end of year dinner or something to acknowledge the volunteers. And the kids and tots and kids leaders, another division within the church, described her working relationship as very close and supportive, and they were all very well connected to each other, uh, uh, open, friendly, respectful, caring, and close. This is what they have been talking about their relationship under relational dimensions, and everyone realizes that we don't have enough money. There's a limited pool of money, and there is nothing like, oh, my ministry is more important than yours. I should have that money. That's something that they don't have. So I think in terms of the team thing, everyone works for each other rather than against each other. So that's something that has been coming through under the relational dimension. The Dream Leader team, there's another branch within the church, said, look, integrity is very essential, and it's one that affects the budgeting process the most, because we really expect people to be honest with the way they deal with finance. There's a lot of trust, I think, because people do have a lot of freedom to spend, but there's a trust that people will do the right thing. So that was something coming through under relational dimension, that people were trusting each other. And the finance administrator said that his door was always open to staff, and they could approach him at any time within an update on their budget. And some of these people who were involved in formulating budgets or making those plans were not accounting literate. So they always relied on others who were more kind of literate or who had more experience with budget setting, and they always got help from other people in doing or putting up the budget together. And generosity was also seen in this case. They wanted to be generous because that's what God's like, and we must be like Him. So that's important. Some people felt disgruntled. I think one or two were not treated well in other places, and they said we don't want to really leave the church because that's kind of being unkind to the God, and the God always loved the church, so that's how they are perceiving the church. So if we leave because we don't get along with somebody else, no, that's not nice, because because our belief systems expect us to be with the church always. So that's something that has been internalized and incorporated into the area of responsibility. The shared context, this is one of the things within the three dimensions of social capital theory. And primary goal was spiritual. That's something everyone believed in. Senior leader once said, we want to see God's kingdom established in the earth. We want to see God glorified. We want to see people come to Christ. We want to see families healed and life touched and people changed, and we want to see the gospel. So this is what the primary goal of the church was. And our bottom line is not for profit. Our bottom line is people. And because of this Christian worldview, interviews had shared Christian terms and jargon and shared understanding of the biblical terms. The structural dimension, as I said earlier, and this is more to do with the networking that's happening within the people. It was they talk about the discussions were very robust, and sometimes they disagreed with each other. We are not afraid of conflict. We are not afraid of disagreeing with each other. We are all pretty opinionated. We are very, very honest, blunt. I couldn't do with people care team because some people would be offended. So you could disagree. There's no problem with disagreeing, but it's all about constructive criticisms and learning from each other. So monitoring the budget, again, network ties were quite common. And the Tots and Kids leader, she used the skills of her husband, who was an accountant, and in order to understand the financial matters. And although she had no financial knowledge, but she sought the husband's help to be able to put up a financial plan together for her Tots and Kids area. So informal network ties were quite common, and that sort of brought in strong bonds between people. That's something common in the social capital literature. And there's social ties. People are all united. They all have spiritual aspirations, and the bonding was quite common. And that's within the structural dimension. And appropriable organization exists. And that's where people come together in a tea room or getting to have lunch together in a special room, and that's something promoted by communal spaces. So coming to the discussion, I hope I'm not over time. So at this church, we find that budgeting was as much a social process where people coming together, trying to put things together, trying to consult each other, more participatory approach as much as a technical process. It's both like Bolan and Pondi, it's combination of rational and natural perspective. Supportive working relationship among those involved in budgeting, similar to social capital, were also reported in other literature like Huriasi and others. 2016, they studied budgeting in the Anglican Church of Melanesia. So they found lots of people supporting each other and in the church. And we found sacrificial behavior at FS in the context of budgeting. People were willing to sacrifice their ministry if there was something else more needed, which was going to help change church to fulfill the goals better. I think that was always an element of sacrificing. The other thing that came up in the interviews was the church always supported other people to come in and present papers in terms of giving them air tickets, booking hotels, and so forth, which possibly other organizations were not doing. But one of the members said that the other church she worked for, I think the minister had to pay his own airfare and all that to just to deliver a presentation somewhere else. So this is something this church was quite willing to share the cost with visitors in particular. So spirituality is something which was dominating the church, and money was required to achieve the common goal of extending the kingdom of God, but money was not seen to be the driving force, but it was more about looking after the people. That's something that was coming through. So we look at the norms that were found in the social capital literature, and we just looked at cooperation, honesty, respect, teamwork, trust, transparency, trust, and trustworthiness. Quite a few of literature seem to be covering all those areas. So we just tried to show how they were evident within the church as well. So one of the features of budgeting, which we don't find particularly in the church literature, was the practice of some managers with budgeting responsibilities turning to family and friends for help, particularly in preparing or monitoring budgets. Like we see the Tots and Kids leader asking her husband to help her with the monitoring and with the preparation of budgets. And similarly, you could also turn to other colleagues to get or your friends to help you to come up with those plans. So we retain Napier and Goshal's 3 dimensions of social capital, trying to give them a little bit of empirical flesh as well. And we try to rename cognitive dimension. We thought the word shared context might work better. And the bonding of social capital in particular was very relevant to the budgeting process because it all talked about teamwork, building teamwork, and physical spaces were also added to structural dimension, which seemed to be lacking from Napier and Goshal's original framework. So coming to the conclusion of the paper, we are trying to contribute to both budgeting and social capital literature, particularly trying to contribute to the natural dimension of Bolan and Pondi's article that accounting is a combination of both rational and natural dimensions. So we are focusing more on natural about people behavior in this case. So how we're trying to fill a gap on how social capital. Initially, I said the secular and the sacred dimensions were kind of separated. So we're trying to integrate that, and that is done through use of social capital theory. So this study will be of interest, we believe, to other non-profit organizations involved in budgeting, and particularly those involved in setting budgeting policy, because we try and look at the social side of budgeting. And finally, Bolan and Pondi view accounting or budgeting as a union of natural and rational processes. And we may mostly see in the literature the rational processes. And what we have done here is we're trying to focus more on the natural or social aspects of the budgeting process. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Very interesting finding. Yeah. In fact, a lot of literature has mentioned about the future of non-profit organization, including churches and also what we call it, other organization, non-profit organization as a third sector. Yeah, meaning in addition to the government sector, public sector, the private sector, the third sector, which is non-profit, is going to be a huge contribution to the GDP and also the economy of the world. So I think one of the issues always raised in non-profit organization administration is how they manage, how they manage financial. I think there is a need to adhere to a lot of standards. I know that I'm doing a lot of research on money laundering. There is a standard called Financial Action Task Force that looks specifically so that there is no abuse of donation given by people for other purposes. And I think it is interesting that being a management accountant researcher, you look at social capital and make it interesting instead of just looking at private sector, looking at a third sector, which is non-profit organization. Very interesting. Congratulations. Yes, indeed, I have given you time, yeah, because I don't know whether you say this is something good or bad, but at least you are not rushing in presenting your paper. You keep calm and you satisfied with the work you are able to do that. I think because the other presenters. Yeah. So what matters to me is people who are here. Okay, if a person chooses not to be here, I think it will get too bad. Okay, enough with me. I think I will now want to invite Dr. Ali Suzana from University of She's a management accounting researcher. In fact, her research was on supply chain. She did a lot of interviews and case studies on private organizations and private sector organizations. Yeah. So without much ado, I know that Dr. Ali Suzana will be able to give very good feedback on your paper. So without much ado, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Norma. Okay, let me just share my screen. Okay, wait. Okay, can you all see my screen? The slides.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much to the organizer for inviting me to become a discussant for today's session. Actually, this is the first paper for our parallel session. Okay, I would like also to thank Prof. Ms. Sharma for his presentation on this paper. Congratulations, very well presented. So now just allow me to share some discussion points on this paper. Okay, so my name is Ali Suzana Kasim. I am from the Accounting Research Institute, UITM, which is the University Technology Mara. And the paper that I would like to discuss is Social Capital and Budgeting in a Local Church. Right. Okay, hang on. How do I go to the next slide? All right. Okay, so my discussion will cover, among others, these 4 points, which I will briefly summarize the paper, and then I will proceed with highlighting the contributions of the paper. I would also like to discuss a bit on the limitations and the strengths, and I will then end my discussion with several suggestions for further improvement. Okay. So as we have seen earlier, the aim of this paper is to examine the budgeting process in a local church, okay, from the social capital perspective, which is beyond the common ground of discussing budgeting within the local church, which is the sacred and secular divide. Okay, so from the way I see it, the research problem that is highlighted by the authors are that budgeting practices in churches are often examined from this sacred secular divide perspective, and not much has been examined from a social capital viewpoint. So I think that creates a very interesting findings, okay, from this paper. And also the authors, they use a qualitative case study with an interpretive methodology. Among their key findings are, they demonstrated that budgeting is integral to the achievement of a commonly understood goal, necessitating both sacred values and practical financial planning. The budgeting process involves setting of the objectives objectives, the allocation of resources, getting the feedback on the spending, as well as the achievement of spiritual aspirations. So also they found that budgeting fosters cooperative behavior, which strengthens and reinforces social capital. Okay, so in highlighting the contribution of this paper, I would see that this paper contributes in terms of the theoretical contribution, whereby they add to the body of literature in budgeting. As we know, in management accounting, a lot of the budgeting literature we examine and we discuss more on technical terms. We lacking in the social capital perspective, okay, especially from the church setting. So this paper contributes by offering or providing an alternative view of church budgeting beyond sacred and secular divide. So the other thing that they have also added is the adaptation of a framework from earlier work by Napier and Bushell in 1998, whereby they have proposed a framework presenting additional and revised structural, relational, and cognitive dimensions from the original framework. Okay, so from there, by reading the paper, I can see that a lot of the strength of this paper, apart from the earlier contribution, that was also the strength, they also have managed to provide a methodology, okay, to examine this church budgeting using qualitative methodology, which is appropriate considering that it is something new that they want to look into, and also they have used the interpretive approach, right? And by reading the explanation on the methodology, which I find is comprehensive, the paper explains the number of interviews conducted. It's very clear how many interviews were conducted, how many interviewees were involved, okay, and the role of the interviewees. They also included how they can ensure the quality or the rigor of the qualitative data. For example, there's the insider approach, which led to the acceptance of the interviewer by the interviewees. Okay. So overall, the findings, it's not just giving input for budgeting policymakers only for the churches, okay? But as Prof. Norma has mentioned just now, it is also useful for other non-profit organizations, and in fact for other religious organizations also, okay? However, okay, here I have some of the limitations which I think we can discuss further, which I think the authors may have, may want to look into. The first thing that I would like to touch on is when I read the introduction of the paper, it's quite brief. Okay, it's quite brief in the sense that we know that there is an alternative that is being brought here, which is the alternative to look at budgeting for churches from social capital perspective. However, what motivates that research? That one I think is not that clear to me, okay, which is the research problem, can be further elaborated. For example, why is it important to examine budgeting from the social capital perspective? Okay, so what is wrong with the the sacred secular divide? So that one, maybe it was included in the literature review section, but I think it can add value to the paper if the discussion on that sacred secular divide move to the introduction. So it will give quite a clear background to the paper, to the study. The reader would know, okay, so this is why it is important to examine it from the social capital perspective. Okay, and also I find that the background does not discuss much about the budgeting process as a social construct. I think two studies were mentioned. One is by Chen Hall et al. The other one I can't remember. Okay, so maybe that can provide a background to this study. Okay. All right, so I mentioned about there is also explanation. Oh, sorry, there is lack of explanation. What is the budgeting practice under the existing sacred profane divide? And also there is no mention of what type of case study design. I noticed that you mentioned in your presentation just now, it was a multiple site case study, but I believe the paper was a single case study, right? So maybe because you did mention in your paper that these findings relate to one of the case studies from a bigger project, okay? Right, and then, however, I want to know why you have chosen FS, okay? Why you have chosen Fountain Spring as the case study. That one is missing. What is so unique about FS that has motivated you to conduct this study there, okay? I would also like to see explanation about the sampling technique, which normally for case study designs, we choose purposive sampling. So that is where you can provide the justification for why you choose FS. In terms of the data analysis, you did mention that the analysis was facilitated by a computer software, specifically using NVivo. And I would like to see more on the Saldana's method of coding. Perhaps that one has just been mentioned it's just stated there, a brief description of what the coding method involves, I think can add value to the paper. And my last concern is that most of the references can be updated with more recent references. Okay. So this brings me to this is only my suggestion for further improvement, right? Apart from including more recent references, maybe the authors can add literature on budgeting within social capital area, in addition to the two studies that have been mentioned, which was conducted in 2012 and 2013. Perhaps there are more studies now that you can include in your paper. Okay, and you can find out what are the issues related to budgeting in this area, okay, for the churches or other religious organization. What about other countries? In some other countries, for example, in Malaysia or in Singapore, maybe they have also done budgeting among mosques, which is the Muslim religious organization. So there could be some comparison that can be made there, right? Okay, so the themes, I can see that this paper highlights several themes. For example, you highlighted generosity, you highlighted values, and so on. Okay, so those are themes. Perhaps you can make it clarify in your paper that those are the themes that have emerged from the data. I would also suggest that this paper use some data display. Okay, for example, when you are explaining on the budgeting process flow, it might help if you have a simple diagram to show what are the stages involved, or maybe you want to incorporate who are those involved in the budgeting process within that diagram. Okay, and there's this table 3, which is your adapted framework and your findings. This can also be converted into a diagram. It's just that to make it, sometimes more visible, so it catches the attention of the reader more effectively. Okay, in the paper also, there are quite many direct quotations have been inserted. Okay, I think although they are mostly relevant, but perhaps you can choose those that are most relevant to be included. The reason is because for me, when the direct quotations are too many, it somehow, the flow is somehow disturbed there when I'm reading the paper. But I'm sure they are all important quotations, important points that can be made there. It's just a matter of restructuring or, putting them in paragraphs rather than in quotations. Okay, for the data analysis, further explanation on the coding just now can be included, right? And I'm interested to know if there are other findings that have been done, because this data, the data that you have here is from 2012 or something like that. It's quite a long time ago. So I think perhaps there are other findings that have been done more recently, and that can be made as a comparison, right? You may also want to include managerial implication. For example, you mentioned that budgeting was found to foster, strengthen, and reinforce social capital among those involved in the process, and so on. So how does this finding benefit the churches from the management point of view? Okay, so that can be interesting for you to include in there, as well as, since we did mention earlier on, and you also mentioned sustainability. So how can sustainability be discussed in this context of church budgeting? Okay, perhaps I can suggest one more thing. When you are looking into the church budgeting, if the budgeting process, so from your findings, how does it help to, for example, to overcome the common dysfunctional behavior of budgeting? Because you mentioned the norms, you mentioned the trust, the teamwork. I'm sure that those things can be used to overcome the typical dysfunctional behavior often associated with budgeting. So that I think can be included in your discussion. So I think that's all, Pranoma.
The discussion and the comment feedback are equally interesting and very crucial to improve the paper.
Pranoma, I'm sorry, but we cannot hear your voice clearly.
Because of the question. Are you okay? Is it okay now, Doctor? No?
It's difficult to hear. I could hear the discussion clearly, but yeah.
Can you hear me? No.
Still not clear, bro.
Hello. We cannot hear.
We can hear, but your voice sounds too distant.
Yeah, I think at the beginning was all good. It's just
Yeah.
I'm not so sure what happened. But can Umesh respond? If there is example there are questions, let's see, there's a question here, you know. They cannot hear. Okay, that is actually a comment that they cannot hear me. Maybe Umesh, can you respond to Dr. Ellie?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Noma. Thank you, Dr. Eli, for your constructive comments. I think very helpful. Yes, I agree with most of the suggestions you have made. I think I need to extend my introduction and talk about why we need social capital in this area, and much more, as you said, about the sacred and the profane kind of split, and why we need an integration.
Yeah, Prof. Sharma, may I add? What I mean is that we want to know what is wrong with that view of the sacred, and maybe in church literature, church budgeting literature, accounting is separated due to something negative. How people view accounting as a negative activity compared to the church activities, which is seen as sacred. So I think that can be included.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think quite helpful comments, and I think you also talked about talking about more literature on budgeting with social construction. So that's something I think we can draw on from Kowalski and others they have done a bit of work on participatory budgets, sampling techniques, purposive. I think we had a similar view coming from another paper, which the student had. We were using 3 different organizations, and the reviewer wanted us to talk about purposive sampling. So we quite agree with that, and they also asked us to put more about the data analysis, and we went back to Miles and Haberman. So we had a great chunk of that written in the other paper. And surely I agree with that the references can be updated, and the study is not only limited to church, but can be extended to mosque or temples or anything of religious organization. And I think there's a lot of lessons for other non or charitable organizations as well. Yeah, and yeah, and the codes, I think we'll try and reduce, as you said, and we'll try and trying to explain it more. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for your comments. Sure. There are some stuff in the chat box. So
in the chat box. Is there any questions? I believe I just received a note that the other participant may be able, or the other speaker may be able to join. Unfortunately, we have very little time left, so maybe Dr. Sakar is able to come in come now. But anyway, do you have any question from the group? You can ask maybe. Have you published any paper from this research?
we had social capital. The earlier paper has been published in Accounting Forum. That was in relation to 3 different organizations. So this is a separate one. So we presented this one at Accounting and Finance Association of Australia and New Zealand conference, and this is the second conference, and we're trying advances in management accounting, but we haven't heard from the reviewers yet, so still waiting. Yeah.
From the audience, you can speak up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Everyone else, can you
Recording in progress.
I don't know what went wrong. I was taken out and then now invited to come in. Dr. Sakar, are you there somewhere?
Dr. Sakar is not here, Prof, but your voice is clear now.
It's clear now. You have to get up and then come back and then
Yeah.
Okay. Because she was telling me that the other speaker suddenly will want to come in, but of course I think we have very limited time left. I was asking if she can come. She can come
Recording
now.
in progress.
Yeah, sure.
I will just. Because otherwise, I think because sometimes you know, like this thing happens. Yeah. The participant didn't turn up, and then last minute she's coming. But anyway, but I think it is a good job, Umesh. I think you can go very far from here. Because I do a lot of research on money laundering involving non-profit organization.
Excellent.
So there are a lot of issues being raised on this matter. You know, things like globally, the standard requires that non-profit organization must disclose and be transparent on the sources of funding and how the funds are being used. What are the activities that they have? In fact, if they have sources of funding, they must have a listing of who the funders are. So these are the kind of things. These are the kind of thing that maybe sometimes people now Prosaka says she's not sure. Okay, never mind. So never mind. I think we participant, if you have any question, you can ask. Or Dr. Ali, you have any more questions?
Yeah, from Norma, can I ask one question?
Yeah, Dr. Ibrahim, please.
Yeah. No, I was just wondering your definition of social capital in a developed country like New Zealand. Are you from New Zealand or Australia?
New Zealand.
New Zealand would be I think would be a bit different than in developing country, yeah? Because when you talk about a developing country, I think in terms of one of their major responsibility in the church or in the mosque would be also to help the poor, to help the poor, and especially some of them, I remember, would also want to help the poor, not only by giving them what we call some fund, but also if they can be, if they can, start a small business and where this organization can contribute some form of fund. So I think, but in New Zealand, I guess that come under the state function, not the church, I think.
It's coming under WINS. That's the Ministry of Social Development.
Whereas in developing country, you have the ministry help, but sometimes I think it's not that efficient. So you still need like the church or mosque to help. And I think some of the big malls are doing that. There's a different, I see, in terms of social capital. When you talk about social capital, the definition, it could be wider in that sense.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
thank you.
Prof. Ibrahim did a lot of case studies when he was in his PhD. So
I use Lachlan model, the skeleton model. And the Lachlan and his wife, I think they do a lot of research on that. But they were looking.
Broadband and Lachlan.
Broadband. But they were looking from the sacred line.
Okay. Any more questions? Let me just check for you. Darussalam, you have question, Darussalam? Dr. Leela?
No problem.
No.
Yes, Professor Norma.
You have question for, so we need to give him question because we still have 10 minutes.
Right. Okay. Actually, not really, but in my expertise area. But okay, I'm curious to know because previously I heard Professor Norma mentions about money laundering as well. So I'm not sure whether have you considered, including including this variable, to further investigate in your model or not. This one.
Like I said, it's a church, so I think one of the goals here was kind of trust, that we have to
Mhm.
faith, and we don't expect people to be doing money laundering, no, in that sort of
Yes, I
spiritual.
understand. This is
Yeah.
pretty. It's quite maybe sometimes it's too sensitive.
Yeah.
You know, and it's probably tapping in terms of you know, not only by the law, but in terms of the ethics issue as well. But it seems like I have read, okay, some paper, okay, they have successfully, you know, like investigating in this kind of sensitive issue by it's kind of, you know, spinning out into the other way around. But to me, okay, I think it would be great for you know, general consumer and the people, you know, like that if we can be educated more about
Yeah.
this important ethical issue.
Yeah.
I mean, all right, into some study. So that's what I
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah, I had one of my students. He was from Papua New Guinea, so he did
Yes.
special topic on money laundering, and he was
Mhm.
talking about some of the leaders in his countries, how they were involved with other people from outside, and how they were transferring money, you know, and that sort of thing, or leading to corruption, and that sort of thing, you know, happening in the Pacific region, and
Mhm.
and it seemed to be okay because that's was deemed to be informal way of doing things there. So that is
Okay.
quite an interesting area. So there has been some issues on money laundering, no, in
Yes.
places, no, yeah.
Mhm.
And
And
I think we have a very tight process in New Zealand. Like if you go to the bank with more than $10,000, then you need your passport and no declare where you got that money from. No, so lots of questions are being raised now. So
I think New Zealand and also Australia in some country they have a very high reputation, you know, in terms of, you know, like super transparent,
yeah,
see that sort of thing. I think
yeah,
maybe another issue you probably consider to, you know, like include in your model is about, okay, if we say money laundering is too sensitive, maybe move to, you know, a bit more general, such as CG, corporate governance, that sort of things. That might help.
yeah. Thank you.
Less sensitive issue. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
I think in this the church example we had presenting in the earlier years there was a leader appointed and this guy was kind of not honest, so he mismanaged some money and then the confidence was lost by the public, so people stopped giving donations and all that, and then
Yes.
they came up with a new structure, new very reliable honest people, transparent, and the confidence, it took them a long time to get that confidence back. And so that could be something I could possibly be looking at, but it's
Yes.
very difficult to get that negative stories, no, from the people.
Yes.
But that's
Okay.
something that has really happened there. There
Okay.
was someone who mismanaged and the confidence was lost over time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have seen in some paper they mentions about one issue that might relate to, you know, like what you just said. It says about social punishment following the mismanagement of, you know, like executive people. Social punishment. Yes, I have seen this concept in field paper following the ethical and, you know, ethical paper area. That one, social punishment. If my memory correct me, I think I have seen, okay, in field paper, exploring this concept.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Umesh can present it next year in Thailand. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Please. Looking forward to seeing you in Thailand next year.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I haven't been to Thailand, so look forward to coming.
Yes. Welcome. Welcome. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, I think the thing about non-profit organization is the trust. You know, people have this feeling that they trust they are doing good deeds. Therefore, why should question? But again, I think there are a lot of charity organizations like
Yes.
in the UK, Oxfam, yeah, even Red Cross. So these are also good charity, but they were involved in money laundering. Yeah. So because of the issue of trust and people doing good things, you never think that non-profit organization will be involved. But that is the very reason why Financial Action Task Force is giving a lot of focus on non-profit organization, because the NPOs can be abused, by perpetrators. So I think we have a few minutes before but is there anyone else who wants to contribute?
I think the other thing from Norma, I could see nowadays, I think is the online donation. And that one is also, we need to be careful, because some of these online donation, especially to non-profit organization, some actually are not actually people, have been actually trapped, in the sense that, they believe in this online donation and they donated, and somehow some of these organizations are actually not real. No. They are there actually to what we call, in a way, there's a fraud there.
Very good. Maybe that one Dr. Ellie will pick up and present in Thailand next year, together with Professor Ibrahim.
Yes, Prof.
Have a face-to-face conference next year, is it?
Yeah. Yes, that's what looking forward to that. We plan to organize a hybrid one, but let us see the situation. Okay, so if the situation allow us, we might go 100% with offline, but currently we plan to do a hybrid, offline and online. Yes.
Yeah, that's good, You visit.
Hello.
We lost Prof. Ibrahim.
No, okay, no. What I'm saying, your place, is it in Bangkok? Is it?
Yeah. Yes, because next year we're going to organize the APMAA, and Thurukit Bandit will host the APMAA 2022 in Bangkok next year, please.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll see you there then.
Yes, please. Looking forward to seeing you there, Professor Ibrahim. Okay.
Any more questions that you wish to ask or want to share? Otherwise, I think we will give this back to the MC. But I think the MC will only take it automatically at 12. So if there's any...
So you only accept management accounting papers or anything outside as well for this conference?
That is Prof. Lila. Please
ask. This question is for me. All right. Okay. So we also welcome, like performance measurement and the other issue that relating to performance management as well. We welcome.
The sustainability and the sort of CSR,
Yes, please.
Okay.
We welcome. We do welcome. That's why I said previously, looking forward to seeing and listening to your presentation. Maybe a more related issue to maybe you go with the social enterprise on cities and non-profit organization next year.
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome.
Dr. Sharma, you can bring a lot of people from New Zealand, so that we can have a good community from New Zealand for APMAA.
Yes. I think at the moment, because of the COVID situations, most universities are getting tighter with the funding and all that. So I'm just hoping everything gets back to normal. And,
Yes. of course, we're looking forward to, you know, a more lively, a more higher engagement, you know, of the conference between all the participants next year as well. And keep, you know, we should keep our finger crossed for a suiting situation. I mean, I would say looking forward to see the post-COVID, you know, in a more positive way. Yes, we'll can get back to live, you know, very normal life. Also, we would say like a new normal life. But looking forward to that.
Yeah, great.
Umesh, is Professor Stuart Locke still in Waikato?
Stuart Locke, his finance is
Audit, I think finance and audit, no?
finance he's retired.
Retired.
Yeah,
and yes.
Yeah, my supervisor was Professor Stewart Lawrence. Do you know him? Or? No. Yeah, he's more critical. Yeah. Area.
Yeah, I went to Waikato.
I think I met you there. We were in the meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, we signed a memorandum, something of understanding.
MOU, yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I think I met you in the Asian Accounting Conference. That was a long time.
Oh, Sydney.
In Sydney, Macquarie University.
Yeah. Okay. You throw a lot of mud on the wall, some will stick, some will stick, and you get to know them back a few years later. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Good.
But I think the Indonesian team very creative in producing all this, with the stage and with the music. You feel like you are in person attending the conference.
Yeah.
Very creative. So what shall we do?
Okay. Have you planned to have you know, your paper published further in you know, like Associate Journal or other journal?
This one we have submitted to Advances in Management Accounting. So so they're still, the reviewers are still reading. So I'm not sure when. So just waiting.
Seems like, is it in the tier? In which tier? Do you know that information?
Because we're following the Australian Business Deans Council listing. So in that it's a tier, kind of tier 1 according to the Business Deans list.
Okay.
ABDC,
IBDC. Okay. Yeah, I think it's in Scopus as well. So
Oh, great! Index in Scopus as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Interesting.
It all depends on the reviewers. No, sometimes you get a bad one. So
it depends on the review, but you know, like it depends on how well we can, you know, cope with or handle with the review. You know, even from, you know, for one paper from the same publication, let's say that they have two blind reviewer. One might say, oh, this is an excellent paper, it's pretty good. Another one might say, okay, we need a major revision. I think based on, we need to be able to deal with, and we need to be ready to deal with this situation. As you know, if you listen to the talk that Professor Thomas shared with us yesterday, and he mentioned about that the longest time that you're willing to get published is about 6 years. So it depends. I remember, yes. And even Kathy said, "Oh, you're not scared. The doctoral student with this information." So you know, it depends on how well. We can deal with it.
It's perseverance, no? Perseverance and resilience, and keep going.
Keep going. Okay, I think it's 1 o'clock. 12 o'clock. 1 o'clock Malaysia time. 12 o'clock Jakarta and Bangkok time.
Yes.
I think we need to leave. I think they have some program, maybe promotional video in the main room, so we can leave the room. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a nice day. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to the main room.
Professor.
Have a nice lunch.
So Seika.
Because
You will enjoy Thailand in the main room.
All right.
breakfast.
See our video. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye bye.
These feelings are waiting for you to come back. From the north to the south, from northeast to west, from world-famous beaches to untouched islands, from time to time, from place to place. From the ocean up to the sky, from color to color, from street to rooftop, from hot to cold, from city to nature, from traditional to festival, from dusk till dawn, around the clock, around the country. Amazing feelings are waiting for you to explore again. Once the world is ready. Until we meet again. Amazing Thailand.
Would it be wonderful if we could integrate leading innovation along with the learning in the business world? From an old square classroom to one with no borders. Get ready for a digital transformational era. When successful decisions and marketing strategies require a big data to fully become a successful marketer in online business world. Leave behind all the old principles to becoming a digital economy. To become valuable e-commerce providers with infinite imagination. With new innovation, there is no such thing as impossible, only possible. Dare to try, dare to do, and be open-minded to new things. Learning and adapting. Comprehend more to achieve more. Because a digital world is a world that data is unified. The thought of a large world will then shrink to the size of your palm. Open up to new perspectives, make your business unbeatable, and leave others in the dust. Ignite your creativity. Erase the impossibility. Move towards the digital era with the confidence, because for us, nothing is impossible. And we can make every possibility happen with the learning in digital era. Move forward together with us at SIBA, College of Innovative Business and Accountancy, Turakit Bandit University, Startup University.